She's home! Nice.
I missed you guys.
Alright, so see those unlock in-game channel more content.
Waiting. Okay, I see ourselves. Good. Hey guys, just a little bit of a speed bump getting the tech to work and exercising the demons from Twitch. We will be right back. And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Normally, my responsibility next would be to introduce our guests for the interview segment, but this is not an interview segment. We are not interviewing these people. We are not asking them questions and sitting idly by while they explain their answers. No, we are engaging with them, as only people having a conversation can do. And so, since it's not my responsibility to introduce them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and let them fight over who has initiative in this introduction.
Hi, I'm Adam Daigle. I'm managing developer here at Paizo.
And I'm John Compton. I'm the organized play lead developer.
How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Overall, pretty nice.
It's nice to see you.
Well, we certainly appreciate you joining us for tonight's episode. For those of you who are joining us live, remember that we record these episodes live on twitch.tv/nodirection. And if you have any questions for us, or Adam, or John, or us, or Adam, or John, then please ask them, and we will get your questions. We'll be going through the questions periodically throughout the episode and bringing them on air when appropriate.
So, I had a thought the other day, because I've got my reunion coming up this weekend, my 20th high school reunion, and I know that you guys have really cool jobs. It's really cool to guys like me and Param, but if you were going to your high school reunion and had to explain what you do, how would you explain your job to a layperson? Let's start with John this time, because Adam won initiative last time.
Oh boy. So at my high school reunion, for some people it'd just be, hey, remember that game that I used to play when I was in high school? Well, I work on it now, or the equivalent of it. And I find that I have to do that a lot, or this sort of thing a lot when I'm like meeting with relatives or the like, because some of my family members know exactly what I do, in part because I have an older cousin who really introduced my brother and me to the game. But all the rest, it's, okay, dice. Have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? Let's go back to Monopoly. You know how that has dice and there's a board? Great. But now the hotels are fighting each other, and houses
Go
get
on.
dialogue. Oh man, that'd be a great way. See, I was always upset that, like when I first learned Monopoly, and then I still have never finished a game of it, that you couldn't do anything to blow up other people's hotels.
Well, that was all the conflict resolution in that level was actual LARPing.
Ooh, that's why I always messed it up. Okay, all right.
Flip a board, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. Gee, you'd think
Adam,
they'd have
do you
something
have
about that in the manual.
I know.
Do you have a different take on how you would explain your job, Adam?
I do pretty much similar things. I one of the things that this comes up a lot is like going to get your hair cut, and the barber wants to talk a lot. And they're like, so what do you do? And if I really don't feel like getting into it, I say, I work in publishing, because that sounds suitably boring enough to people where, they'll just, or I'll say, I'm an editor, because then they're like, oh, words, never mind. I'll just keep cutting your hair and we'll talk about something else.
This guy must love grammar.
Yeah, I tried to hit those touchstones. Like, most people know what Dungeons and Dragons is, at least, even if they don't really understand the concept of a role-playing game. And if you have to get into that, a lot of times I'm just like, okay, imagine a movie where the actors can change the story while you're watching the movie. And just, collaborative storytelling with conflict resolution and dragons.
Yeah, it partly depends on the age group of people. Like, if I were to head back to a high school reunion now, this is the point at which a modest number of my my fellow graduees have children and the like running around. So it's like, okay, well, I know you might not be sold on it, but hey, it has educational value. Our last family reunion had that sort of thing. The same cousin who introduced my brother and me to the game now at this point has a, I think, 12-year-old son, and it's just like, so Tim, find a beginner box? And I don't know. It's the same sort of story where it's like, okay, yeah, look, math on the fly, that's always lovely. Hey, have you always wanted to teach your kid really obscure but real words? Like coercion and duress and macabre. Baluster. Yada, yada, yada. It's that sort of stuff.
And also with, like, oh, I'm sorry.
Go nuts.
I was just saying, also with, like, the popularity of, like, superhero movies and sci-fi and Game of Thrones and that type of stuff, like, nerddom has kind of, popped into the mainstream culture as far as pop culture goes. So it's not hard to point to some of those things and equate, at least similar stories that we're telling.
Like, if you ever get frustrated watching Game of Thrones, you didn't want a character to die, you could have prevented it.
you could be personally rolling the one that kills your favorite character again and again and again.
So,
I feel that behind Game of Thrones is a whole bunch of really bad die rolls.
probably.
Now, that's a topic that I've kind of had on my brain lately, is the idea that no matter what role-playing game we're describing, we all invariably have to go back to Kleenex, or rather Dungeons & Dragons. For a second there, I thought you froze.
I didn't understand what you meant by back to Kleenex, but you mean as in a brand that's larger than the product.
I mean, are we ever going to get to a point, you think, where we don't automatically have to reference the industry leader just to describe what our hobby is?
Probably. I think that'll be a matter of, like, ubiquity. Because no matter how far role-playing games spread, it's still only hitting a certain portion of the audience, or of the prospective audience of the population, what have you. And so something like Kleenex or Hoover or what have you, those are things where it's, okay, this is an everyday or a household device or tool or what have you, where everybody's going to have some exposure to it. But until I'm using Pathfinder to brush my teeth or whatever the weekly hobby is, it's common across the entire neighborhood, I think we're going to struggle with some of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to need, like, a commercial during the Super Bowl or something like that, if nothing else.
I mean, I was talking with a couple of friends a couple days ago, and they were talking about how they were having to explain certain what we might think of as high-profile Marvel characters like the Hulk and Iron Man to some people who only understood Batman and Superman, and after that disappeared. Just no other knowledge of things. Wow. So even something where it has many successful movies and shows up again and again and again, even then it's something that unless you're tapped into that type of media, then you might never have the exposure to change your thinking or begin to associate it with something different. So until the hobby becomes even more widespread, I think that's going to be a really uphill battle.
But I feel like with a lot of people, to explain Dungeons & Dragons, you still need to explain what a role-playing game is. So if you start with a different touchstone, if you say it's like Skyrim, but around a table with friends, and then you explain what an RPG is, you can skip over the Kleenex of the industry. Which
That's
feels
true,
like
yeah.
it feels like I'm saying something derogatory about Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know why.
Well,
I
I
just-
mean, the reason, I mean, it was about a couple of months ago. One of my very favorite gaming sites, Waypoint, did a really good series of articles that featured a bunch of players playing Pathfinder. And then when it got published out there, everybody was very happy, except for they called it Pathfinder Everywhere, but the title. And it was like, wait, what? No. And I understand that exposure is great. And I also understand that SEO said that right now that was probably the best option because they're targeting non-role players as their audience. But I was like, oh no. Crash.
Yeah, I ran into that recently with something. There was a short Vice News documentary that this woman's doing about using Pathfinder to rehabilitate prisoners coming out of prison to keep, recidivism down. And the title of the thing was, Dungeons and Dragons, helps, former prisoners or something like that. But they were playing Pathfinder. I actually contacted the director and producer, and she was just like, yeah, they totally love Pathfinder way more than anything else. And, they, exclusively asked for that. And it was just one of those things that's like, yep, but if you put Pathfinder on, a Vice News documentary, people aren't going to know it nearly as well as Dungeons and Dragons, which was kind of sad, especially since they were specifically super excited about Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. And that was something I'm kind of really passionate about, is like the idea of getting, books into prisons, and the fact that we have our softcover pocket editions. That's something that makes this insanely more easy than it was before, because hardcovers are banned from a lot of prison facilities.
Well, it's also something, because of the PRD, someone that's getting out of prison that has limited funds has full access to the rules. He could play Pathfinder right out of prison, and he doesn't have the same access to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rules, I don't think. So this isn't just like using fantasy RPGs. There are a lot of advantages to using Pathfinder specifically in this situation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand the realities of it, to the extent that I'm a bit hypocritical here, because for a long time when we were trying to get our YouTube channel established, I tagged our Pathfinder stuff, also included a D&D tag. So I have to own up to also being guilty here.
Well, yeah, I know if I'm talking to my parents about it, it took them long enough just to digest the word Dungeons & Dragons, or the term Dungeons & Dragons, into their vocabulary, talking about the thing that I do. So now to expect them to understand that I changed games because I preferred an older system and another company picked it up, and then I fell in love with what that other company was doing with the world. Like, it was just like, yeah, I'm playing D&D. Sure, Mom and Dad.
Well, there's another angle to this too, and I guess this might be why I'm a little bit more sensitive to this, is that when I was growing up, I grew up in the deep American South. When you mention Dungeons and Dragons down here, well, you're very familiar with this. You get some fun reactions. I had one old woman literally tried to seize my backpack to preserve my soul from going to the devils.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I heard stories about people that you could get away with saying you were playing Call of Cthulhu, but not Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh wow.
Because one has broader context. Yeah, there's one advantage to Pathfinder had. It wasn't around during the Satanic Panic.
Or worse, do any of you guys remember a story about a group of vampire players who kind of went on a nice little murder adventure from about 20 years ago? Well,
and it's not just an urban legend?
No, it's not. Because they really did abduct and kill somebody. It's on Dateline and all the news and stuff, and they were from my town. So
wow.
There was a bit of that. So there was a big resurgence of it. I mean, they had news crews and protesters at the local game store and everything for a little while there. It was nuts.
Wow.
I feel like this is a story that ends with, and I know so much about it because...
Yeah, no, nothing about this at all.
Yeah, thankfully my mom was always super supportive, and when other people tried to, butt into our family stuff and be like, well, you know what your son's doing? She's just like, yeah, he's reading and he's getting smarter and he's hanging out with his friends in our living room.
I know where he is at all hours. Admittedly, he hasn't moved in 5 hours, but
I mean, this counts as moving.
Yeah.
across the country at this point.
Yeah.
Now, Jay
have you guys noticed, how is Starfinder doing as far as like people adopting the title? Because people aren't just calling it Space D&D or something. Like, it feels like it has a stronger potential as a brand.
Yeah, it seemed. I mean, out the gate, it definitely seems that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that I think that we've been able to. The Kleenex term in this case is different. For Pathfinder, it's remember that D&D thing? It's like that. Whereas in this case, our starting point is Pathfinder, and it's like, hey, remember Pathfinder? It's like that, but in space, in simple terms. So I think that because we're working off of a different touchstone, then we get different press about it. We're getting a slightly different audience and interest group. So that's definitely to our advantage in that regard.
Now, I think a lot of the advantage there is that, like with Pathfinder, its origin stories is deeply intertwined with D&D. I mean, that's not something we can deny. Well, the very creation of it and its background, and most of the people that worked on its prior history all are deeply entwined with directly to Dungeons and Dragons. Whereas with Starfinder, there's a nice decade of separation, and it's also twice removed. Though I guess it still does have its roots. I mean, you could take a KOTOR, and somebody playing the old Knights of the Old Republic games on PC or Xbox could pick up a Starfinder manual and be rather familiar with what they're being asked to do.
Yeah, definitely a lot of familiarity there. I mean, even from a who worked on what perspective, Owen was doing a fair bit on D20 Modern, D20 Future. Even one of the Star Wars games, but I don't remember the exact one.
Might have been Saga. I don't
It
know.
would be. So there's definitely some of that knowledge and some of that experience that was carried over into Starfinder, and no doubt helped to flavor it. But yeah, there's, no matter where you look, there's some continuity in that regard, and it all kind of spirals down and affects each other.
One thing that's interesting, speaking of brand in regards to Starfinder, not necessarily in its brand being recognized, but since it is further divorced from Dungeons and Dragons and especially 3.5 edition, it's more stuff we made. Like Pathfinder, we were still dealing with rust monsters and all of this other stuff that's been around for so much longer. We've given some new takes on things and given new names to things to kind of like help make it our own. But in Starfinder, you've got like goblins and elves and dwarves, and then pretty much a whole lot of the rest of that stuff is all stuff that we made up right here in this office. So it's more ours, and we're not relying on existing brands, except for like what we were saying about how this is kind of a stem from Pathfinder.
You've planted the idea in my head that the only thing that was keeping Galarian from being spacebound was the rust monsters. They were like, we have to eradicate rust monsters before we can make these giant metal tubes that shoot us into space.
They keep eating the rockets.
I do like that idea of there's even the countdown going, and then it's just suddenly you see things swarming over the ice-coated rocket propulsion system.
So it's a hot meal for them. It's
A whole bunch of gremlins, just like...
Oh yeah, gremlins are... Yeah, that was one of the things that came up when we were first starting to plan out even playable races, but definitely in terms of like creatures to design. It was like, can we play space gremlins? Or can we have space gremlins? Or what do space gremlins even do? And then there was a lot of shouting. And eventually we got back onto productive things, but...
They take the ship apart while you're in it.
I need that.
There's something on the wing. The space wing.
Oh, you always say there's something on the wing. Every campaign, Adam, you have some sort of cry wolf moment. First it's, oh, my cleric doesn't get spells anymore. Maybe something happened to my deity. And we tell you, bah, whatever. Channel some more energy.
Yeah, that doesn't work either.
Never mind. We're interested again.
The whole Space Gremlin thing kind of falls apart, though, because it's different to take apart and malfunction something when you still have breathable atmosphere.
That was another kind of wacky thing when we were starting to figure out creatures was, okay, let's just go through all the different creature types. All right, oozes, yeah, sure. Magical beasts, yeah. Outsiders, Fae. What do we even... What Space Fae? Space Fae. And then we started brainstorming some ideas, and some of those are definitely in Alien Archive. But, the idea of, okay, nature spirit within the relative vacuum of space. Whoa. And just even though it's oversimplification to say, oh yeah, this thing in space, it's definitely been the starting point of a lot of our conversations and brainstorms. And then we realized that whatever this thing in space idea is actually kind of dumb, but we've come up with something cool as a result. It's how some of the Starfinder Society planning sessions go as well.
Ooh. I'm going to continue the Shatner streak and suggest that tribbles are space fae.
I could kind of see that, but given our first world perspective, or the perspective of the first world playing dimension, what have you, so it'd kind of be like, okay, what's their shtick in the first world, or how have they been brought over? How do they reflect the first world? Are they from a design before legs or appendages were really a thing? Are they
Certainly after hair.
Certainly after hair, unless I don't think. I mean, my Star Trek lore is pretty sad in the grand scheme of things, but I don't know. Maybe it was a whole bunch of cilia, and it never was hair for insulation in the first place, and this is all mobility based. Or their whiskers, their sensory organs. They can sense emotions, and they make us happy, and then they make strange purring sounds.
Kurt Walker argues that tribbles are aberrations.
Ooh, I could see that too.
I always thought they were just the cell divisions happening in a much larger creature that we couldn't see simply because of size of scale.
So like macromitosis?
Yes.
I do like the idea of just tribbles budding. All right. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cute, fuzzy things, really the primary one we have is... oh no, I'm blanking on the name.
Skitterman?
The Skittermander, yeah.
But they're also frightening.
They are.
Well, the young ones.
Yeah. So Skittermanders are like 8-legged, playable little critters that are coming out in Alien Archive, and they sure do look cute and fuzzy. And then you start reading their creature description, and you realize just how... No, these are very alien creatures, and no, you don't want to hug that baby. That's a terrible idea. They basically, oversimplified explanation is they have we'll call it larval form, an infant form, an adolescent form that is kind of face huggery.
Oh,
There might be a feeding tube involved.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
They get
an adorable feeding tube.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kind of precious.
It's the ugly duckling of space aliens. They are ferocious, terrifying little twerps when they're young. They're cute as all get out when they're adults.
Now, we got a question from chat from Justin P. Slutter. They were directing it at us, but I think this is actually more interesting if we get your guys' answer. What are we playing or running these days?
Ooh.
So I am playing in a very occasional Shattered Star game that Mark Seifter runs, and it's one of those very rotating cast sorts of things where it's like 8 or 9 people on the roster, and probably at any given time 3 or 4 of us show up because of schedule and freelance and all that stuff. Thirsty has offered or has been compelled by other people to run a Starfinder game for a couple of folks and me. We'll see if that ever gets off the ground. It's one of those, oh yeah, we'll totally do this. 7 months later, oh geez, oh yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? Oh wow. So that's a possibility. Also, there's some Pathfinder Society stuff that we've been running locally. Kyle and Ani Pratt, they were venture captains in Georgia. They now live out in the Seattle area. Have been very bravely trying to start up Pathfinder Society in sort of a home event format with a lot of their work friends. And that worked out really well for about 4 months. They did it once a month for about 4 months. And after that, it's kind of fallen off. So we need to get things figured out again. So there are a bunch of different plots and developments in Pathfinder Society, and one of the people who has always reacted the best to those things in person is Nani Pratt, who is very behind on a lot of the plot lines, but there are so many of those adventures that I want to run for her and Kyle and several others, just so that I can be like, and then it's this plot development, and watch as Nani's face melts, and she runs circles around the table, like, and you're like, good, that one was all worth it. Okay. Next scenario that we're running is this one, and you can have her do it again. And I so rarely get to experience that these days, because last time she really played regularly was maybe season 6. So I don't know, we just need to get off our rears and get that moving. So a little bit of Pathfinder Society, a little bit of Shattered Star, and an online game using Roll20 that's our ongoing, no, we swear we'll get back to this Wrath of the Righteous game, which our Georgia home group started up after finishing Kingmaker, and 2 weeks ago we played our first session in 9 months, and this past Sunday we played another round of it, and we're still kind of on a high because we've played 2 sessions in a row. We don't know if that's going to continue, but it's 3 years later, and we're partway through book 3. So we're not necessarily the most diligent in scheduling those games.
Yeah, that's very similar to the situation I'm in with my Office Pathfinder Society game, because every year after Gen Con, everyone that goes to Gen Con for Blind Ferret is like, we should get into Pathfinder Society. And a couple of years ago, we finally did it. We started a game that was just going to be a private game run at the office, and we ran, I think, 2 sessions, and then didn't run until the following Gen Con. And we were like, hey, when was the last time we played? It's been a year? All right, no, we're getting into it. We are doing it now. This is going to be a regular thing. A couple of sessions, and then no. And so a couple of weeks ago, shortly after Gen Con, we ran our first session again with this group. So we've played like 6 times in 3 years. But this time we're sticking to it. Maybe.
Yeah, just getting that rhythm going where it's, okay, we're going to do it on this date every month, or whatever it is. Or Adam and I were in a Temple of Elemental Evil adaptation that James Jacobs ran for a while. And by adaptation, we mean he would look in the book and say, well, it sure does say 6 bugbears. And then he would put those down, and would take the Pathfinder stats for them, no matter what the CR was. So our group was consistently going against like CR, our level +5 encounters, just because, I don't know, I guess this was balanced back in 2nd edition. So
granted, it was for like the total table, or the total party was like 9 people, which typically we'd have at least 5 or 6 every time.
We averaged about 5.
Yeah.
But whew, those encounters. And then right after one of them, when you'd be like, well, we're out of healing, we're out of spells, all of us are down to half hit points. Hey, look, a door. All right, let's open this thing.
I always forget for a moment how spoiled I am over here. When I always talk to when people ask me about this, and I'm like, oh, just get a group together, you can play. Because I've had some permutation of the same gaming group meeting regularly, and I mean multiple times per month, usually weekly, for 20 years. And I guess not everybody gets that, but man, it's awesome when you have it.
Yeah, I'm not in any current games.
Wow.
Whoa.
And part of that is, well, because James's thing ended, but Rob was GMing the other 2 campaigns I was in. We were doing Mummy's Mask and Hell's Vengeance, and as Starfinder ramped up, he would like, well, hey, let's just pause it this week. Okay, let's pause it this week too. And then eventually it was just like, I don't have time, because we were just all so incredibly slammed getting Starfinder out, and we haven't really picked any of that up yet. And then I've been writing an adventure path, which is a lot of darn work. So
I should be writing an adventure.
Yeah.
Appreciate
So
you
I
taking
haven't.
the time to
Yeah,
talk
most
to
of
us,
my
guys.
time outside of the office, I've been either writing or taking breaks for my brain to be sane by not writing.
And a lot of folks around here are in a fairly similar boat where they're taking on a whole bunch of other different little projects here and there. So one of the things that I've found is that it's a lot harder to really get a reliable group together to do like an entire adventure path. But we've had a lot of luck with some of our other developers like Jason Keeley and Joe Piscini, who are both really good about like finding games that we can run 3 sessions of, and we'll have an entire campaign out of that. Jason just ran a game called, I believe it's Unseen Armies for us, which was positively charming. I think we ended up doing like 6 sessions of it, but it has a character sheet. It's a D100 system where it's, okay, did you roll below your score? Hot diggity do, you don't die. And we got caught up in a lot of the storytelling of it, so we maybe rolled dice about 4 times each session. But no, that was absolutely great. As our Honolulu fire department team was solving an arsonist ghost mystery, which is like, okay, this was clearly not Pathfinder, and this was a neat little break from things. So we're kind of looking to do more 2 to 4 session sorts of campaigns, especially with things that we've had on our shelves for a decade and have sworn to ourselves, no, one day we'll run this thing. I swear I don't just buy these books because I want them and then I'm going to hide them on a bookshelf. I'm really going to use these. So trying to make the most of those. And these pickup games are definitely one of those things. Board game culture has also been growing around Paizo a fair bit because it's another great pickup thing. And especially from Gen Con. So Joe Piscini, Jason Keeley, Adrian Ng as well, one of our editors, all of them picked up a bunch of board games and have been sharing them around and playing them. So One Deck Dungeon is a really cute 2-player against a board game. And another one that I really enjoyed for a lower level competitive game is called Dice Forger, or Dice Forges, something like that.
Dice Forge.
Dice Forge. Yeah, we had a board game get together to celebrate Raccoon's birthday, and so a bunch of us show up and we're like, okay, which of these games should we play? And I voiced my preference because I really love cooperative games. And one of the attendees' spouses was there, and we already knew, is super competitive with board games. So she's like, I want the most competitive thing. If I can't say that I won at the end of it, I don't understand the point. And so, like, well, okay, this is going to be fun. But yeah, it was one of those games where it's like, it's kind of like Dominion, where you can, if you want to live in a bubble, you can kind of pretend that nobody else is doing anything until the end when you lose. And it allowed me to kind of play myself against the board, and then every once in a while she would shout, I take these things, and I screw over your character. And I'm like, yeah, all right, that's cool. So, still lots of gaming going on, but as far as long-term campaigns go, less of it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I want to point out. One is that One Deck Dungeon was in Board Game Bento, which is the subscription box for board games that I curate for. So I like that you brought it up because that just reminds people that I pick quality games.
And we have to legally disclose thanks to the FCC.
No, we don't have to disclose if somebody else says that they like One Deck Dungeon. I think it's okay. I'm just bragging.
Oh. I'm just super paranoid about that lately, man. After like way too many lectures because I work in the education about like the do's and don'ts of online material. It's just like, yeah. I'm terribly scared of all the horrible things some mean lawyers could do.
Yeah, to you. They can't come to Canada.
No, they can't.
But I did, in case anyone noticed, I made a face when you mentioned Dice Forge. I have nothing against the game. I actually enjoy the game quite a bit. My only problem was that at the same time that it was announced, I was also developing a dice builder game. Because the main gimmick for Dice Forge is that it comes with a blank die, and you are building resources, and you're like upgrading your 1 side to a 2 side, and so you customize the die as you play. And so yeah, I thought it was super clever making that same game, and then when that press release came out and I'm reading it on ICV2, I'm like, I don't like you, Dice Forge. Except I do like Dice Forge. It's a good game.
I'm glad I could make you smile and die on the inside in the same outfit.
Oh no.
But I just wanted to point out, so like I've also had a long regular group. We're going on 12 years now, I believe, together, and like 10 campaigns maybe at this point. But man, adulthood is really starting to cramp our style, because one of our members moved away, so we turned to a semi-digital game.
Harder.
Yeah, and now the GM just announced that he's having a baby, so that'll be 3 parents in the group. My wife left the group so that she could look after our kids when we're playing. I had my second daughter now, so like, yeah, it's really starting to add up, and I hope we can survive having another kid in the group. I'm very happy for Jeff, but man, that inconveniences me big time.
Yeah, this is why I'm putting off adulthood and escaping into this giant-made Dungeons and Dragons cabin for as long as possible.
Well, one of the advantages of this Office PFS group I'm in is that they're all in their 20s, so...
Good choice.
Full of energy.
Young ones.
Yeah, but none of them are your boss, or else that's going to get real awkward when you kill their characters.
No, Somer doesn't have time for us. He's waiting to play any kind of games.
That never enters into office politics on your side, dudes. Like, have you ever, like, has anybody been, like, really terrified to slay the unslain?
Well, he's pretty specific in that. Yeah.
I think after the first sort of cautionary growls from Eric, I think at that point people started being like, you know what? No. Sort of basically bleep that. Yeah, we're going to be the ones who do it. Or occasionally we'll in the brainstorms for whatever product, especially adventures. It'll be like, oh yeah, and maybe we have a list of the people who have died to whatever the campaign villain is, and we'll put Ostog on there. Sort of moment where it's just like stick it to him thing. Be like, hey Eric, I found this in print, and but that would involve us being far more petty than we are. So it normally doesn't go any farther than the brainstorming phase.
But it doesn't go the complete other direction where it's like, say, versus the Royal Sampler.
Yeah. I mean, we occasionally do that sort of stuff in some of the Twitch games that we've done for various promotions. When we did that first Dynamite comic Humble Bundle, that was one where I got to run Wes, Sutter, and Eric through a little adventure, and I think goblins, temporal jumping goblins had somehow made off with Wes's Moleskin notebook. They had made off with something for each of the other 2 guys. I forget exactly what. Oh, I think they had made off with all of Eric's next notes that they were going to see about publishing, whether he wanted them or not. And then something for Sutter. But, that was sort of one of those moments where it's also like, oh yeah, and then we can also kill Ostog the Unslain on camera. And you'll have to smile about it because we're doing a promotional event, Eric. Yeah, I don't think we run into that terribly much.
No.
We have a couple of questions from chat, and it's from Bard Wannabe, and he is super specific. In PFS Season 8, we learned a lot about these. I told you, super specific.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
In PFS Season 8, we learned a lot about the Elemental Lords, but where does the fire goddess Feronia, mother of Ragathiel, ex-wife of Dispater, fit in? She's supposed to be from the Plane of Fire too, right?
Yeah, so Jessica Price was the one who wrote the Plane of Fire entry in the Planes of Power Gazetteer. And as I recall, she went into some detail on some of the Gazetteer locations there, hitting upon some of the not really elementally lordy style figures. And I think Feronia ended up featuring in one of those. There's also sort of this matriarch salamander style individual in there as well, who may or may not have tied in. But I would check Planes of Power, because I think that ended up coming up there a little bit. And the idea is that Feronia is not an elemental lord. She has within her within all of her portfolio and areas of interest, things like I think wildfires and bonfires, among other things. But she's not strictly the elemental plane of fire. Whereas Ymeri and starts with an A, and I'm briefly blanking on him in the Lambent Garnet. Those two are basically personifications of the elemental planes. So, yay!
Also, because Bard Wannabe followed up.
Atreya, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Also, Bard Wannabe follows up with, now that... Wow. Sorry. Now that Law Shupo is a core deity in Starfinder, do you think we'll get a Deities of Tian Sha book for Pathfinder?
Oh man, that would be super cool. The most I'm really going to say about that one is that about 4 or 5 months ago, a bunch of folks around the office started being like, you know what? We're figuring out the schedule for another year. This would be a great time to pitch a whole bunch of stuff. And so I think I myself wrote up 5 different campaign setting proposals that were each like 3 or 4 pages, and it was just like, here you go, Eric. And so we ended up having a bunch of different things, and A Different Faiths book was one of the proposals. As for exactly what's going to be coming down the pipeline in 2018 and beyond, that'll be something for other people to announce.
We've announced through May.
All right. Let's see, I only have one more question from chat. I'm just trying to make sure they're not ignored. This one's more up your alley, John. What is the first PFS scenario in Season 9 that has to do with War of the Crown directly?
Okay, so we have 3 different scenarios that are tying into, or leading up into War of the Crown, or War for the Crown. 908, 911, and 913. So 908 is going to be the first one. It's a 1-5. And, we'll be getting a product page up there soon enough, but sure, let's go with it. It's called Birthright Betrayed. And it does involve running around Taldor and doing a little bit of politicking, but really you're doing some bigger things to try and win the favor of one side while really throwing another person under the figurative bus. So that one's being written by Sam Polak, who has written a bunch of scenarios in the past. He kind of hasn't shown up in a couple of seasons, but he's really been doing some delightful stuff with this one so far, including like all those historical moments where it's like, oh, the defenestration of Prague, or Santa Anna sneaking away and them finding him by his silken underwear. Like those level of awkward historical moments, he's really capturing well in the outline that he sent me. And so I think we're going to have a lot of fun political moments in that, as the PCs are getting to do more typical Pathfinder things.
Now, this brings up a question I've always had: is like, how do you reach that balance for getting adventures that deal directly to the meta plot, and versus how many are more standalone one-offs?
For Pathfinder Society?
Yes.
That's something we figure out as we're planning the season as a whole. So, usually, like for a typical season of 25 scenarios, we might just pencil in that we're going to have 8 tied into the meta plot, just as a starting number. And then we start to figure out, okay, what are these going to be doing for each one? And so in the case of Season 8, we knew that we wanted to do 2 on every one of the elemental planes, and we wanted one of them to be urban-ish and one of them to be frontiersy. And then I think we expanded to maybe a total of 10 in the end, as opposed to 8. But it's that level of thing. It changes for every season.
All right. There's a couple of interesting comments from Liz Quartz, who's in chat right now. She says, y'all should play some of the laundry RPG that's in the conference room right behind John's head. I'm assuming it's literal laundry?
It says laundry on it.
That's odd. I've never heard of that. Do you know anything about that game, Ryan?
I have never heard of this game. I could maybe imagine a laundry board game, but not a laundry RPG. Although the laundromat is a setting in a weird amount of movies, so maybe somebody just took that idea and ran with it. Have you guys found it though? Right? How big is this thing?
It's looking like a 300-page book or so.
Whoa!
Really?
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be. Oh, wait a second. That looks like laundry might be code for something cyberpunk.
A role-playing game based on the Laundry Files novels by Charles Stross.
So it's not literal laundry. Well, now I'm disappointed.
It has a bunch of people with guns and tentacles coming out of all the hoo-hee.
Yeah,
So-
but freshly pressed shirts?
I've heard of this. I've just never played it.
I mean, they're wearing clothes.
Okay,
Maybe
Lilith's
basic
explained
role-playing
it's you're the cleanup crew after Lovecraftian events. So you're damage control for Lovecraft. All right, I'm back on board. This sounds kind of cool. But it would
licensed
have
by
to start
Chaos
with
Team.
a laundromat. Like, that would have to be this thing's tavern with a mysterious guy in the corner. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the collection behind you? Because it's such a large, esoteric collection of things. What are some of the things you've noticed? Some of your favorite things on those weird shelves?
So, just to give a quick, very basic tour. So, over toward what is our right is where all the Pathfinder books are. We start to get into here are a bunch of other RPGs. And then we have the Amazing Stories collection, which are all of the sci-fi stories from like late 1800s to...
I think we start in early 1920s.
Oh, is it that late? Okay.
Yeah.
And then goes until like the 70s or 80s or something like that. So I think that's one of the properties that Paizo has to some degree. And I forget exactly.
Yeah, I don't know where this collection was. I don't remember the story of where this was acquired from, but yeah, it takes up 3 shelves.
I know that in previous interviews you've been particularly proud of that collection, and as I understand it, those pulp sci-fi stories really informed a lot of the design and flavor of Pathfinder.
They've definitely been central to several of the people at Paizo, and have, like, everything that you read sort of shapes what your philosophy is going to be and what your take is on things, and sort of you remember that thing that happened in this book? We should have kind of a version on that, or we should riff on that in our setting. And I think that especially for some of the creators of Galarian and that setting, they featured quite heavily. I personally do not have a lot of familiarity with them.
Same.
So, like, even by the time I got in here, our Planet Stories production had kind of stopped.
Oh,
so,
right.
A before my time sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are you guys reading today that is going to horribly slaughter us tomorrow?
I mean, it's hard for me to escape work. So a lot of the reading that I take home is either stuff that I'm working on or is whatever we have just published, so that I can try to catch up even further on additional resources sanctioning. Otherwise, I'm also trying to stay current with all of our Pathfinder Tales books. So recently finished The Gate in the Sea, or Through the Gate in the Sea, which I really like how that series of stories has gone. Anytime that we get into something like presenting the Mwangi Expanse or Sargava, it can be tempting to kind of walk on eggshells as to how exactly we're presenting it, but I feel that our authors for that, as well as for Fire Soul, did a really nice job of presenting the areas. So I enjoy those, and just keeping up with our canon.
I have been, I guess, I pretty much read a lot of nonfiction. Was reading a book about how to rebuild society if everything collapsed, like the types of stuff you would have to do to, like, relearn metallurgy and stuff like that, which is actually really good for world building, to realize what societies need. And then other stuff, just like a collection of essays from James Baldwin, like nothing really kind of nerd related, but still stuff that's good for your head. The last fiction that I read that blew me away, and this was a couple of years ago, was the Southern Reach trilogy, which today just dropped the trailer for the movie Annihilation, which was based on a novel written by Jeff Vandermeer, who did this Southern Reach trilogy, which is awesome.
So the fact that you say that a book about rebuilding society if everything collapses is not nerd related shows me that we have very different definitions of nerd.
Okay, well, it is. Yeah, yes, there is a lot of like history and science and such in that. So, but it's presented in a very easy to digest format.
Do you remember the title?
I can't right now.
Okay.
Something about. Nah, I can't remember. If I
Yeah,
remember,
send it to me when you remember it, and I'll put it up on
All right.
Facebook because I'm curious, and I'm sure other people are too.
All right, yeah, I will.
Something else I like about your shelves is that the top shelf is where law meets chaos.
Yeah, so as far as the origin for a lot of this stuff, every Gen Con design team has part of a day to wander around and acquire things that they can pick up to sort of familiarize themselves with what else is.
Liz was also very crucial in getting a lot of that.
Oh, that's very true.
Yep.
And so basically there's a lot of collection and fact-finding and all sorts of, oh, what's this thing about? Or, ooh, maybe we should see how this one plays. And a lot of that ends up here. There's also sort of a disparate pile in one corner.
We're running out of space. I think that's every nerd's problem is we're running out of space.
Yeah. It doesn't. It also, just speaking as one of your consumers, it also doesn't help that you all keep making lots of books every month.
What is
Well, I mean, it
wrong
helps
with you guys?
us.
Yeah, it helps you guys totally. Yeah, and I like reading them. It's just at one point in time, my Pathfinder shelf was like half of a bookshelf, and I'm like, oh, look, my little Pathfinder collection right next to my massive 3.5 collection. And now my 3.5 collection is intimidated and shaking at the bottom of the shelf.
You guys mentioned some stuff that was before your time. Something that's happening right now that was kind of, I believe, just as both of you were coming onto Paizo is Kingmaker. And the Kingmaker Alpha for the video game is happening live now. I don't believe either of you had anything to do with the Kingmaker campaign, but it's probably something that you like. It's in that transition period between fans and being Paizo employees. So I'm curious what your take is on how Kingmaker is becoming, like, Kingmaker is back, which isn't something that happens with a lot of APs.
Yeah, I was a AP subscriber from day one when the magazines went away and I got the email like, do you want to switch to this brand new thing? Take a chance, buddy. I was like, all right, sure, I'm on this train. Let's go. But Kingmaker was all done prior to me arriving in the office. I got here like March 2012 when production of Skull and Shackles was starting. So I never actually read Kingmaker when it originally came out because what would happen is since I was getting the subs for all the APs and our group rotated GMs, one of the other GMs was like, I'm going to run that, so don't read it. And I was like, okay. And I would just like read the back matter stuff and, not the actual adventure. So I never got around to it. I did later on, but.
Yeah, so I ended up playing Kingmaker, which we had concluded right before our online Wrath of the Righteous campaign started 3 years ago. But wasn't a part of the Kickstarter, but a couple different things that are worth bringing up. When the first time that we heard of it, that I'm aware, was when Alcat came by with a couple of people and basically set up a computer in one of our meeting rooms, and then we got sort of word of mouth, hey, you should come up and spend half an hour taking a look at this thing. We're like, oh, what is this? Oh my gosh, we're making one of these things? First off, at long last, and second, ooh, that's pretty damn cool. And it's at this stage already? Wow.
Yeah, this was a couple of months before PaizoCon, and Wes had come by, like, me and John's desks and was like, hey, there's a thing in the other conference room if you want to go check it out. And we're like, what?
I think I got a message from Mike Kenway who's just like, so if you want to see some things, come up to this meeting room. Come alone.
Do you often get mysterious emails like that?
Well, I get messages like that from Kenway fairly often.
Kenway is cryptic even when he's trying to communicate. Like, you'll get an IM from him, and it's like he'll instant message you, and he's already like 3 sentences past where he should have started, where he's, he's like, so that thing, is it blue? And you're like, I need more information, man.
And then he'll just respond, just say yes. Okay. But yeah, so we tried that then. One of the other things is that Alcott has been really neat about just staying in contact with a whole bunch of us as far as feedback on it, including the alpha that's just about to launch, I think.
I think it
Launched
already
today.
Already has.
Yep.
Yeah, to a bunch of the Kickstarter backers. And we have a couple of computers set up here where it's just, hey, if you are ever on a break and you want to try it out and then report anything that you find and leave feedback, go nuts. So we have that, but they've also been, since they've basically playing in our playground of the setting, they've also been reaching out to some of us to be writing more things. So I can say that I'm one of the people who will be writing some quest content for Kingmaker, and currently still in the nailing down exactly all the details of my story part of it. But the team has been absolutely fantastic to work with, and including just be like, okay, here's a wall of text, guys, and they're like, great, here's a wall of text back, and just firing back and forth like that. But all sorts of really great ideas, and they're really, really excited to have our ideas helping to shape the game experience.
And one thing that's really cool about that is that even people who have read the Kingmaker Adventure Path and have played through it, they can still play this game, and you'll see a lot of those, familiar touchstones, but there's a lot of new content. I think the end is even slightly a little bit, or there's an alternate or something like that.
I can at least say that there are cool things coming in that last chapter.
Yeah, so there's expanded content, new content, and a couple of little tweaks here and there, so it'll still be fresh for people who are already familiar with a lot of the material.
There's a lot of the stuff where it's like, hey, if you've read through Guide to the River Kingdoms, or if you've read through Kingmaker, and you were to ask yourself, if I had to come up with more content, or if I had to pick on some of these hooks that Paizo left there and may not have ever touched on since, and wanted to turn that into even more playable content for the customer, how would I do that? And the answer is, you go looking through and you're like, oh man, and then we could turn this into this, and we could tie it into that, and then all these different connections, and we get to use the adventure writing background that we have and apply it to a video game, and I think the end product's going to be absolutely fantastic.
What was super cool about seeing it the first time, like back in this spring, whenever they brought us over to show us, I walked in, me and Rob walked over, and just at the moment we walked in, it was in it was during the part of the campaign that Rob had written the book for.
Cool.
And Bowman was playing, and he was getting killed by a creature that I wrote. And so I was just like, oh, this is great.
I'm amazed every time I take a look at it at the speed of progress that game is making. And I follow the games industry fairly closely, as one might assume. And I also follow the video game industry just as closely. And development on video games is usually a lot slower than this. And every time I take a peek at Kingmaker, it's just like, what? There's 500,000 features and you're putting out a public alpha? What?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, they exactly. But they had like a functioning, demo type thing to show us whenever they tried to, when conversations about getting behind all of this was starting. It was just kind of like, hey, instead of hey, we can do a thing, it's like, we can do this. And it was just like, oh.
Look, everything's moving. You can control them.
Yeah, which, makes like negotiations like that probably a whole lot easier, but that's all licensing stuff.
Now, I played through the first 3 books of Kingmaker twice. Both campaigns fell apart around the same time, sadly. But when I was playing the demo starts in book 2, and it starts with an NPC I was familiar with being dragged in front of me in a scene that I do not remember. And I'm very curious if that's a change they made or if it's just a different direction our campaign went. So even though I'm already familiar with half of this adventure path, I just want to see how it plays differently.
That's a good point, man. Most players have not played the written Kingmaker. They've played whatever distorted version of Kingmaker their GM happens to put them through.
Right.
Oh yeah, ours was absolutely dreadful because when we started Kingmaker, that was when our group was really, really heavily into Pathfinder Society organization locally. And so we're like, okay, we just finished Legacy of Fire. We were the good guys then. Okay, everybody but John was a good guy then. Now we've been doing a lot of Pathfinder Society where, for the sake of our community, we have to keep on encouraging people not to be evil. You know what, Kingmaker, this sounds like something we could totally just reverse dungeon and turn evil. So we had a tyrannical hellhole of a kingdom. We were utterly...
What did you do to my river kingdoms?
And then our GM kept on like adding in extra things where it's just like, oh yeah, normally this character would show up and then that character would be dead within a volume. But I've decided he comes back as a Grave Knight. Like, we're cool with that. And then the person playing our leader would be like, I want to marry him. Like, you know what, sure, whatever. We ran into certain evil cults, which it expects you to kick in the door and be like, not on our turf. Die, all of you people. And we just walked in and we're like, so, we realized you're abducting babies. Oh, yes. I mean, no. I mean, are we going to fight? Not necessarily. I mean, how can we come to an arrangement? I mean, you have a small business here. I mean, that's encouraging. So it was our chance to basically retreat from the public eye and be horrible, horrible people, and then step away from that and be like, man, our characters are absolute jerks. Good talk.
Have you got a response set up for when somebody comes up to you at a convention and says, like, I played the video game, but what's with all these books?
I don't know that there's a formal statement, so much as it is, allow me to begin a sales pitch. Wow, hey, you know how you have all these skills, but you might not be able to do X or Y? Well, why not just have a game as well, after you've played through all of Kingmaker, that you can say, I want to be able to fly straight up. Great. Pathfinder.
They're imagination mods. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know whether to be proud or disappointed.
Lilith had another question. She's wondering what your favorite non-hobby games are right now. And she clarified video games, so non-tabletop games, specifically what is stoking the creative fire.
At first, with non-hobby, I was just kind of like dominoes, but that's not really stoking a whole lot of creative fire.
We know that's your
count
hobby.
the, like, bourbon that goes with it, but
5 and 5 go together. Okay.
No, I don't have it. I
Um,
don't have time for games. No.
So I tend to play fairly mindless things in the background while Diego Valdez, who is in customer service at Paizo, tends to play the more plot-heavy things as I watch him play through it. We see the plot elements, and then invariably he gets mowed down by machine gun fire in the game or whatever the hell he's playing.
Doesn't matter what game, always machine gun fire.
Pretty much. I mean, so when we were starting to do Starfinder in the very first place, he was like, okay, well, how well do you know Mass Effect? And I'm like, I don't. I was like, okay, I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to play through the entirety of the Mass Effect trilogy. And you can watch the entire plot line, and I will do the heavy lifting. I was like, that's fantastic. We fairly recently finished up Horizon Zero Dawn, which was glorious. Absolutely fantastic. Both from a narrative perspective, but also from with archaeological training, it was a fun puzzle solving thing just to see, okay, here's what the environment looks like. Here's what little we know at this point. Let's make fan theories, the two of us, and then play through it a couple more hours and then go, oh wait, everything's changed. Oh gosh, new theories. But that was a really well put together game that we enjoyed. And then we're sort of half playing through Andromeda in the same way. And so, I don't know, it's just fun things like that. We tend to do a lot of that style where it's long, involved storyline, third-person point of view. Diego can get gunned down by machine gun fire. Those are really the only criteria we have for these games.
Yeah, I need to finish my freelance so I can get back into Fallout 4 because my settlements, I need to work on my settlements. My settlers are going to get all upset, and there's new things. There's new things I could be giving them, and I'm not giving them. I'm neglecting them. Need to finish that writing.
Yeah, as far as like little casual games though, the one that I was just introduced to this past weekend and have now played far too much of, is called Guild of Dungeoneering. Where it's just a cute little wander through and run an adventurers guild full of really, really hapless individuals who will die in front of you. But it's very cartoony, so you can't feel too bad as the mime you just recruited gets mowed down by, well, for once not machine gun fire, but by minotaurs or something like that. But simple to play and easy enough just to pick up and put back down as needed. So that's been cute.
Yeah, I really like that game. And you were talking about listening to its soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here's a clip, just so the audience can appreciate.
This is the Guild of Dungeoneering. On our quest, we're never veering. Oh, to be a Dungeoneer, swimming in pools of gold.
And I just realized that our audience can totally hear that, but y'all can't. So thank you for
Well,
pretending.
I wasn't saying anything, but I definitely.
Was it one of the Tavern Bard songs?
It was
Or
the title song.
Excellent.
Sorry.
So that's been a fun distraction. But yeah, by and large, I tend to look for the fairly mindless things that I can play while Diego is playing something else in the background.
Now, I do feel I should point out it's been over an hour. Now, normally in an interview we would be winding down now, but this is a conversation. It could go on forever, but you've also both mentioned how busy you are, like 10 times each. So I just want to be clear. How much longer can we have you guys?
Another half hour or so?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I don't want to be guilty of the reason that a hardback gets pushed back a month, okay?
Oh, we don't work on those hardbacks.
Well, I work on everything.
Darren Caldemeyer has a question. He says, with con season winding down, when do you begin brainstorming your games events for next PaizoCon? And as a side note, there's 240 days until PaizoCon.
Oh, that means there's like 300-ish days until Gen Con. Oh.
Which one of those scare you more?
Gen Con.
Really? Why?
Gen Con. Yes. Scope. Volume. It's less about the convention itself and more about what the expectations are for what we will have ready then. PaizoCon, we might have an interactive special ready to go, and those are stressful to put together, sure, but we know what we are dealing with at that point. We know that if all else fails, we are going to be surrounded by fans who will mostly be accepting of it and not have packed their Gen Con pitchforks or anything like that. For Gen Con, though, we're launching a new season at that point. We are changing up the guide. We're expected to have new pre-gens. We might be launching an entirely new campaign at that point. Everything is bigger and flashier, and we have 3 times more content. It's just so much that needs to be perfect and ready. And if it isn't, then that's how people judge the entire rest of the season. Like Season 6. Ultimately, it was not really Season of the Robot and the Adamantine Greatsword. But the Gen Con scenarios set that tone. And so therefore, for 5 to 8 more months of Season 6, people kept on saying it was the Season of the Robot and the Adamantine Greatsword because that's what Adventures 1 through 3 did. So...
Learning experience.
Yeah, we know that whatever we have there is going to set the tone, and we need to have everything as perfect as possible because so many people look at it and be there ready to give us their honest feedback.
Speaking of feedback, Andrew Hoskins says that interactive specials are cake.
Oh.
I'll I'll send him to the support group to let him deliver the news himself. Yeah, interactive specials are, by and large, really tough to put together, both from a development standpoint, but also from a writer standpoint, because there's just so much that you have to consider. And certainly, there's been that push for making them bigger and better and more Wahoo of a story premise, because, well,
And more interactive.
2 years ago, we did some time travel. This year, we're doing some time travel this thingy widget. But next year, we're going on to an asteroid in space to, like, free a demigod. This next year, it's no.
Now the asteroid transforms into a demigod.
It's a transformer robot. But we call it something different for IP purposes.
Right.
Whatever, but it's...
Not a GoBot.
Yeah. So there's sort of that escalation that for several years we had felt... Just like, oh gosh, where do we even go from here? Especially because, like, probably tied for first place, now probably safely second place after, a concern about how a certain mechanic worked in one of these interactive specials. The next most common piece of feedback, even with all those storylines, was, yeah, but it just didn't feel special, And you can see that they're italicizing special. And she's like, I put you on a meteor. You got to change the divine landscape of the inner planes. What do you want from us? So
They want to win Pathfinder.
oh, well, in that case, I can point them to any number of options. So with $8.99, the special that Andrew Hoskins worked on.
Oh, yes, I liked it.
One of the mission goals with that was to de-escalate the plotline degree or extremity, and be like, okay, we're not going to whatever is above a time-traveling space meteor full of demigods. We are going to do a more approachable story that we can put into installments, and don't try and make it super over the top. Just make it good, and make the story work. And then for 900, then we were like, okay, but Miko, in case the two of you are sharing notes, none of that's true here. We need this thing to be completely Wahoo. We're going to blow up a major city. We're going to blow up a major city in our setting. So have fun. And then we did have a transformer.
Oh, God.
now that I think about it.
Oh, yes, I particularly loved that fight.
I wasn't really trying to reference anything for real.
I didn't think about it until now. So maybe we put Hoskins on one of the really Wahoo ones, and then we're like, oh, by the way, no pressure, but everybody's expecting the world of this. Okay. And if you get it wrong, then I'm banning airships. Are you guys familiar with what happened there?
No, but I know he also referenced airships.
Oh, okay. Oh, jeez, he did. So, I will say this in the most loving way, but sometimes our freelancers are a bag of jackals. And Hoskins can have just as much jackal teeth as the rest of them. So basically, he showed up to $8.99 as it ran at Gen Con and wasn't running a table. No, he showed up to play. And so it was a tier 10-11 table full of like venture captains and RVCs, and I think there was one person there who I didn't quite recognize, and it's just like, I have to assume you're along for the ride and are shaking your head sadly. But I think that was Nathan King running that table. Yeah, that sounds right. And so I like to, during Gen Con, make sure that I try to walk past every table at least once during each of the specials to see how things are going. And I walk past that one, and I see that there is a boat in Belkson. And I'm like, so Nathan, what's going on here? He's like, they brought an airship. They brought an airship? Okay, more specific. He, pointing to Hoskins, brought an airship. Which Andrew is like, well, technically it's not banned according to the additional resources, so I figured maybe I just bought one. They're 50,000 gold pieces, Andrew. Well, I don't have any other equipment. Okay. And so I looking on the encounter, and like this part of it, you're going against a whole bunch of Belks and Orcs, all of who are running around with like great axes and javelins down below them. And as the party's just going like, meow, pew, 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 up in the air. and so like I stick around for about half a combat round, and it's just like, what is even make them do the giant encounter, have them throw rocks at it. So like Giant started to throw boulders at the airship, and all the players started screaming, Hoskins most of all, and they landed the thing so they could fight on the ground. But I was just like, Nathan, do you need something more? Like,
Like an adult?
Well, do you need like different stat blocks? Like, what can I do to help you out, buddy? I was like, I could use other stat blocks. Cool. But what books do you have access to on that tablet of yours? Do you have Bestiary 6? Cool. Great. Hang on. And I go and I try to remember what I got. I think I picked up some sort of just absurd miniature. Like, it was maybe the Shemhazian Demon or something like that. And it's just like, and I passed it, and I've done this with a couple of other GMs at different Gen Cons and PaizoCons, where I'm just like, I know this is a table full of adventure captains who all have the most powerful characters at this point. The GM's just kind of there to be like, okay, Chuckles, go ahead and roll your dice, and I'll remove figures, and go ahead and make an attack roll so high that I have to tear my flip mat in half. So I basically brought it to him, and I was like, here you go. He's like, is this what it is? I'm like, no, it's whatever you say it is. And so I walked back, and by the time I got back there, they had started the encounter with one of the archdevils pulled from Bestiary 6. And so he's just like, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, it's Belial. Really? Or no, it's Barbatos. Is it now? I look at the table. Is this Barbatos? And I'm like, that's what we're told. Okay, sounds good. You guys still having fun? We think so. Cool. I'm leaving. I guess they misfortuned him and tried to do a saber suck that didn't quite work, and he broke a whole bunch of stuff. I forget quite how it worked out. But either way, I guess Hoskins had some sort of bet going on back home of whether or not I would ban airships in the next additional resources. And I forgot completely about it until I got a message from him a couple days ago saying, like, thanks, buddy, I lost that bet, but I sure am glad that I still get to keep my airship. But now, you know, there's always the September-October update that's coming up, so that's always a thing.
Oh man, he could lose the bet and then lose the airship.
I mean, that's one of the perks about writing for Paizo.
Well, I assume that Lucas was at the table, but his comment in chat is that it was the best table ever.
Oh, good. Yeah, Nathan seemed kind of at their mercy.
It looks like there are photos that are being provided.
Great.
Give me a second. Let me see if I can make something happen there. Brian, keep them talking while I investigate this.
Is that the wackiest, most over-the-top PaizoCon experience you can remember?
Not at all. No. There are two leading PaizoCon moments for me. One of them is Shax's House of Pain, which is what followed my first PaizoCon as a Paizo employee, because that was when we were running the playtest version of Siege of the Diamond City that Thurston Hillman wrote, and afterward, because like before then, I only kind of knew who he was, but I had the milestone for that adventure sent over to me from Moreland, who's just like, well, I'm apparently not working on Pathfinder Society anymore, so here you go. It's like, oh wow, this sure is mid-process. Let me provide feedback.
About trading.
But Thirsty and I then hung out in the bar after that, and just first off, we were starting to read some of the initial feedback, which was fantastic, because I think somebody was really mad that in an adventure about demons attacking a city of paladins, his paladin PC got killed by a demon. And we were like, you brought a paladin to a demon fight. You already had the advantage. I don't know how this could have been any more fair for you. But so we were like, oh gosh, this is the first feedback. Then we started going off onto like terrible jackal level cackling about different other possible plans, and one of them was Shax's House of Pain. Basically, we were planning out what would be the absolute worst adventure that we could ever write. And it basically involved going to the Abyss, to Shax, the Demon Lord's home, charnel home. And basically everything he does is some sort of meta punishment of the player base. So it's like, it starts off and you land in the middle of a tea party being run by a whole bunch of demons. It's a social encounter, so give them class levels like Blood Rager or something. I don't know. And then they have to talk their way out of it, but only after they do all these horrible, like, atrocious things to appease these demons. Also, you should have a sidebar about how the atonement spell works. And then you go into this room, and it's like a non-Euclidean dungeon, and then at some point you're dying on the floor, and Shax shows up in a smoking jacket. He's like, I see that you're about to die, but maybe I can give you some potions of healing. Good, you're healthy again. Into the next room. And then, be like, oh, wow, thanks, Shax. That's really great. We'll drink these potions of healing. Ha, ha, ha. As recompense, I will now tear up 10d4 of your chronicle sheets. Rebuild your character based on the XP that you have left. And so that was like a running joke for us for 2 years. And then for an April Fool's Day blog, I did, for April Fool's Day, I think the next year, I sent him a full outline of the assignment. And it was just like, all right, no, seriously, this is all true stuff. Here you go, Thirsty. You will be paid negative $300 for this assignment. It is, as you can see, the outline is due in a week from now. The final turnover is due yesterday. Here are all the sources that you have. This should tie into the Decemvirate Pathfinder Society faction, whose faction missions show up only on a hidden board accessible to Paizo members. Inane stuff like that. And then turned it into a blog that we shared on the Paizo website the following year. So there was that, but there's also Druma Lodge, which was probably even more mad cackling than any of that. The Serpent's Rise Pathfinder Society pre-generated character special, where you play Aspis consortium agents infiltrating the Pathfinder Lodge. And so I got together a couple of Paizo employees, a couple of non-employees, and we basically just ran a table of that. I was like, sure, you know what? I want to make sure that more Paizo folks are playing Pathfinder Society events. I want them to be getting an experience that it's like to be in the room with everybody playing all at once. So I will bring them in and then run this game of it for them. Boy, oh boy, do I work with some some horrendously twisted people. Like, by the time that the slot was wrapping up, we had not finished part one. The origins of Druma Lodge was like, oh, we need to infiltrate the Grand Lodge in this big event. Okay, here's the plan. We're going to be from Druma, because we've never canonically said that there's a Pathfinder Lodge in Druma. So I'm deciding right now that there's no Pathfinder Lodge in Druma. So if we say we're from Druma Lodge, nobody will be able to call us on it because there will be no other Pathfinders from Druma. So are we all in on this, or we're all Druma Lodge? I'm like, yeah. At which point, Thirsty looks at his character sheet and is like, I sell off all of my useful equipment to buy expensive clothes to fit in and say that we're Druma Lodge. Like, oh gosh. And so basically every dumb thing they did, they would kind of like hands in the middle and be like, Druma Lodge! And we kind of got loud and obnoxious, and maybe some people got drunk. But Jessica Price was at that table, and she decided that her character was going to go to one of the few buildings on the map that didn't have any adventure content tied to it at all. She's like, okay, what do I know about this place? It's a museum place, so it probably has like glass display cases. And so like, she and Kyle were trying to do something completely nuts. I don't even remember quite what they're trying to accomplish, but in the end, they're like, got a docent to walk by and try and point out some things, at which point Jessica punched him through a glass window. And it's just like, what are you guys even doing? What are you even doing? So that adventure ran until I think 5 a.m. And we just sort of went into the area right outside the restaurant and just kept on screaming Druma Lodge like the jackals that we are. I use that word a lot to describe delightfully why are you people even here sorts of people.
I blame James and Wes for that.
James.
We inherited it from them.
Yeah, during the Elemental Evil game.
Yeah.
James usually referred to us as jackals. But yeah, so BlizzCon can be pretty madhouse.
And And Param, I believe you have some Madhouse pictures to show us.
I already showed them.
All right. Well,
Yes,
but
yes.
we didn't engage with those pictures.
It was the airship.
Yeah, I showed the airship and the big old mean evil demon mini.
All right.
Excellent.
Throwing up stuff I don't plan to throw up before the show starts is difficult.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's we got a couple of minutes before we got to wrap things up. So why don't we just end with what's something awesome on your agenda this week? Starting with Adam. It's been a while since we heard from you.
Awesome on my agenda this week. We're putting some of the final touches on the last Ruins of Aslant
Wow.
adventure path, which is super exciting. It's been a fun thing working through that. My only regrets for that is that we put out a wildly successful game called Starfinder that has eclipsed any sort of coverage of Ruins of Aslant, but I'm not bitter. And
I know what my regrets are, Adam. That you took out the sub.
no, I put it in.
Did you now?
Not in the same way that it was originally brainstormed, but
Oh.
no, it is in there. So yeah, that's pretty exciting, and I'm working on stuff I can't talk about right now. So that's about it.
So Ruins of Aslan feels like an adventure path you would have started at the end and then worked backwards. Is that? Am I?
No.
Nope.
That would be
Nope. Totally wrong.
weird, but
All right.
I could see where some of that would work. Like,
Yeah.
in a strange way, this adventure path adventure that I'm writing right now, it's like I've got it broken down into 5 parts, and I've got it mostly done from parts 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, and the first part is the one that I need to do the most work on, which is super weird, and I don't know how I did that, but it actually is intuitive and it makes sense. So I don't know. I couldn't figure out some of the little like early start stuff, but I knew what everything else needed to be. So it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And John,
Yeah.
what's awesome with you?
So this week, my main thing is developing Pathfinder Society 9-07, which is called Salvation of the Sages. So Season 9, all sorts of different faction storylines, and so we're doing Sovereign Court early, leading up to War for the Crown, but we're also doing a pretty big thing with the Scarab Sages faction. And so we have the author Matt Duvall, who recently turned this in, and I'm starting to work on it. And it's a tier 7 to 11 adventure that is, it's big. There are so many opportunities that are showing up in Season 9 so far, in which it's not just, oh, you're working for the faction leader, or you're working for this venture captain, but rather there are all these scenes that are happening in delightful ways that are, oh, no, you are going to work directly with this person who is also on the board, and has a prospect of keeling over dead if you are negligent, sort of thing with faction leaders, with venture captains, with all sorts of really important NPCs. And Salvation of the Sages, I think, is going to be a really great scenario it's going to be a must play for people who have been following our faction storylines, because a lot of the questions that people have had about the faction are getting resolved and addressed in that scenario, and can't wait to see how it turns out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both. This was kind of an experimental episode for it, but I believe everyone had a good time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Good. All
Always
right.
like
We might
coming on our
do
show.
something like this in the future.
Yeah.
Probably not with you guys again, if that's cool. We just want to mix things up. But you guys were a great prototype for this format.
Excellent.
Glad to help out.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there
All right.
anything?
Well, we'll go for it, Pam.
Oh, well, we haven't given them the. Is there anything
Yeah,
you
no,
guys
go
want
for
to? Is there anything you guys want to shout out to or call attention to that you want our audience to know about? It doesn't have to be Pathfinder related.
I mean, the things that I would shout out and point to are various things that we've been working on
Right.
or are working on. So,
The stuff that, people are hopefully already buying.
or excited to be doing so in the near future. But I don't know, like the main thing that I would do is just point out how happy I am with how the seasons of our various campaigns are already going. Starfinder Society is already doing really well, and a big part of that is not only because of Thurston Hillman's work in developing it, but also The authors that we've had so far have been really hitting things on the head. Eleanor Ferrone's characterizations of a bunch of our faction leaders has been fantastic. Today, we released the first of our after Gen Con scenarios written by Joe Passini. And it's totally a Space Hulk, go hunt bugs in space style of thing, but it's opening up some really great plot lines. But Season 9 also is opening up really well. Just the level of our authors being able to tap into the existing storylines that we're now really starting to resolve in big ways. Alex Greenshields did amazing stuff with 902, for example. I played
that one the other day.
Excellent.
Oh no, 902. Did he do 2 scenarios?
He did 902. The Case of Missing Persons.
Oh, okay. No, I played the School of Spirits, which was that's from the previous season.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Although there are some similar plot threads.
Okay.
So if you like where Schools of Spirits went, play A Case of Missing Persons.
All right.
It is the start of our Liberty's Edge storyline, and we ended up not putting it on the first day and a half at Gen Con because part of one of the specials has a slight hint that something is amiss, and 902 really starts to be like, oh, hey, did you notice that something was kind of weird? This is why we're worried. We're loving these faction things, but even the ones that we just released, Christopher Wasco just wrote his second scenario. Good Lord, he is fast. Like by the halfway point of the writing cycle, he was like, "Yeah, so I wrote the whole thing here." Oh, jeez. But down to Mike Kimmel, who wrote the first of these 2 Scarab Sages adventures that just released today, and really nailing a whole bunch of archaeological concepts on the head. Just all sorts of really fun stuff that I'm looking forward to.
There's a weird comment in chat. It says, "And you found your dad." Is that an in joke to 902? Nope, not at all. All right.
Mm-hmm. Moving on.
Not that I know of.
Oh no, it's something Andrew Hoskins knows about. All right. Adam, was there anything else you want to shout out to?
Nope, I think it's good.
All right, great. Well, once again, thanks for joining us, guys. And for everyone that's watching us on Twitch, we will be right back with something right after this.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
And we're back.
Yes, sorry, I did something that screwed something up. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
The display will fix
Hey.
itself in a moment, guys.
All right, cool. So, Param,
Yo.
it's 10 o'clock.
Yes, it is.
We could start wrapping things up, or we can go to some of our banter points that we didn't get time to go with Adam and John.
I think we should start wrapping up.
No problem at all. So, you know what? Let's just start by talking about what I'm doing here. Because people have been used to me with the Terrordrome in the background and my G.I. Joe displays for a long time now, as long as we've been doing it live. And suddenly I've got a different background. So it's simply, like I mentioned earlier, I've got the 2 kids now, and there's only so many rooms in the house. So we are planning on moving in the near future. And in the meantime, we are prepping my office. We're turning that into a new baby's room. We're going to be upgrading Scarlett's room to a kid's room. And I'm in the basement where I used to have an entertainment center. But now I've got the TV and stuff, and I've put away all the DVDs that I just never watch anyway. So yeah, the new background is my board games over there, Pathfinder shelf, TV's right here, and then this is our gaming area. Let's see if I can move to display it better. So yeah, that's... we don't have the cool integrated screen that Jeff made. That's in the other room, so we'll have to see that in a future episode. But you can't really see it, but on the whiteboard there's the notes about... I'm trying to find the perfect place to sit for all this. Our Hell's Rebels campaign. We've got some very specific shelves with miniatures on the right side and stuff that I've worked on the left side, plus some random Transformers that were moved from the entertainment center. But yeah, that's... This poll, by the way, is the worst.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I was like, how do you work with that at all?
So
Ever.
normally it's just a nuisance, but because Matt's Matt's playing from home and he Skypes in. So Jeff plays at the far head of the table.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be to his left. If Jay's here, he'll be right there. And then Millie is on the other head of the table, and Corey is on this side of the pole. And so the Jeff GM area is kind of that other side of the pole where all the miniatures are and everything. Not that we use miniatures anymore because of our digital table. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's his play area.
I have a solution, Ryan.
Tear down that pole.
No.
Go ahead.
This is your solution.
What
For
is
those
that?
of you who do not know, that this is a camera mount meant for webcams that you can fasten to a wall, such as that pole. So put his camera with the use of a USB extension and a nice webcam that I know you're currently staring into, and you can screw this into the bottom of that camera and then mount it temporarily on that pole. So instead of having to... So now the camera dude will have complete view of the table, no problem whatsoever.
So there would have been a good suggestion for our last setup, but because we moved to a digital table, we don't have a camera for Matt. Matt just looks at the digital table through Roll20.
Oh.
And he doesn't look at our faces.
Well, poo.
And the other thing is that this is the only room in the house that Tina didn't do the renovations for. It was like this when we got here, and I do not trust the previous owners who did this renovation. It's just not good, Param.
Mm-hmm. Plus, you don't usually have big support poles if they're not necessary.
Yeah, that's like we have had problems with the layout of this basement for as long as we've lived here. We've had 5 or 6 different setups, and none of them are good. The only time that I actually used that to my advantage was running the Pathfinder Society games for Blind Ferret, because we've started playing them here. Just the only way that I can really participate in them regularly is if we're doing it here, so that I can help Tina with the kids when she needs it. And yeah, I was GMing from the opposite side of the pole. And it was the intention was that I was just going to be a mysterious voice calling the shots, explaining what was happening, and people could not see my face. People could not see what I was doing specifically. They only got impressions of it, which is fine because the 2 scenarios I'd ran recently were Black Waters and School of Spirits, both of which are ghost-based horror scenarios. The only thing is that very quickly I ended up right here, and just like face to face with the 2 people on this corner and like looking at the whole table. So the concept I had was good enough that even though it didn't really work, I tried it again for the second scenario that I ran, and I'll probably still keep that setup because for whatever reason I like that setup, even though the purpose of the setup never really paid off.
Now, of course, I'm sitting here like making mental gymnastics and mapping out your floor, and it's like, well, I mean, we can play game room Tetris and see what we can do here.
And we'd only have a couple of months of dividends from that, since we're going to be even packing up a lot of this stuff over the next couple of months. So every couple of weeks, people will get insight into how packing up and setting up the house for for prospective buyers is going, and then eventually a move.
Oh yes, a move with a better.
So one
basement.
thing I will say, I am backlit, which is why it's such a nicely lit up back area and a grayed out my face. I do not have a single lamp in my house. It's just not something we own. So I'm going to have to invest in some kind of light to project onto my face, because I know people can see me clearly, but it's still just an awkward lighting situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is like if we were going to up our game on our Twitch, man, and then our streaming areas would look like a studio, like a film studio. They have like green screens and lamps and soft boxes, and like it's like pure deliberate setup.
I think the lived-in look works though.
Now, I wanted to also shout out to a project that I am not in any way involved in, though I used to work for the company. Fat Dragon Games launched their Dragon Lock 3 Kickstarter. I really like shouting out their stuff because they're a good company that delivers fast and cheap and very good products that I have used and continue to use and enjoy a lot. So if you like 3D printed stuff or dungeons, now he started to move on to 3D printed minis that are also part of this, and all kinds of good stuff. And I talked about him last week about the collaboration between him and the open lock format, which was really cool that two companies with a rival product could come together to make a product that makes them both work together. But yeah, it's a cool Kickstarter, and his 3D artwork and the quality of the dungeon tiles just looks better and better every time I see them.
Yeah, you are starting to Cylon, so I'm just going to rapid fire through my 3 shoutouts here. Mm-hmm. One of them is a GoFundMe that I helped set up because I'll call him a friend of mine, but he's someone I only know kind of casually and met in Columbus, Ohio a few years ago. He had a terrible year, and it was all kind of capped off. And a few weeks ago, he is a professional DJ and professional stand-up comedian, and his only way of income was his DJing jobs, his regular DJing jobs. And unfortunately, he ruined his laptop, and he was just in a really bad situation. And he's had some family trouble, and just a lot of things that should not have happened to such just a genuinely nice guy who left a really good impression. So the GoFundMe is called Lost My Parents' Car, Laptop, and More, all of which is true, and it goes into his story there. And I've shared it on my Facebook page. I'll probably share it again. So look for it there. And I just, if you've got $20 lying around, I recommend you send it to him. Just it's charity. It's charity for someone that I believe deserves a break. Next up, a couple of shoutouts. One of them, I'm going to shout out to a spinoff from the Tome Show. It's called Gamer to Gamer. It's Jeff Greiner. If you're familiar with the Tome Show was kind of responsible for No Direction becoming its own thing. He got in touch with me when we were doing 3.5 Private Sanctuary. Jeff Greiner did, and was wondering if I could do a Pathfinder segment for the Tome Show, so that as a D&D podcast, he still considered Pathfinder under the D&D umbrella. Like, this is when Pathfinder was first starting. And so I turned over my first episode, and it's like, this isn't a segment, this is a whole new podcast. And I was like, all right, maybe we should do a whole new podcast. And so that's where that's where No Direction came from. It could have been a Tome Show spinoff. Instead, it became its own thing. So anyway, Gamer to Gamer, he just has a nice casual conversation, similar to what we had with John and Adam tonight. And in the latest episode, he talks to Amy Vorpal, who is a professional gamer. She works with Geek and Sundry and Nerdist, and she has put out some Dungeons & Dragons related comedy music videos. And her last name is Vorpal. It's not spelt the same way as the sword, but it's just a fact, and that's super cool. It's become my favorite show on the Tome Show network, and this particular episode was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for more geek-related content, this is light on the Dungeons & Dragons rules and stuff, and more just on geek culture. So I recommend you check it out, especially if you like today's episode with Adam and John. Mm-hmm. And finally, something that I've meant to shout out to for months now is Professional Goblins. This is Mike Myler's podcast. I was even on an episode. Monica's been on an episode. Was Alex on an episode?
I don't know.
In any case, so this is another video-based Pathfinder and gaming podcast. You can check it out on Mike Myler's YouTube channel. They recently added Savannah Broadway to the cast, so when I did it, it was just Scott and Mike. But now it's a 3-person team. And it's a fun group of people that are enthusiastic about gaming and are friends of the show. So I recommend, again, if you're looking for more gamer content, check it out. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker.
Also known as Param.
Sorry.
And if you want to find the path, you need No Direction.